8 years ago, when I first started blacksmithing in this very workshop, it took me a long time and the knife wasn't perfect, but it was mine, it was my creation. And I realized something. A well-made blade can last a lifetime as long as you take care of it. The same goes for any steel knife in your home. You can get it back to the same shape as when you bought it and probably even better. Today, I'll show you how to bring a dull edge back to life step by step using a whetstone, going from a coarse to a fine to super fine Japanese water stone. The result, a mirror edge that's going to make you a fruit ninja. Let's go.
All right, so before we start sharpening, let's assess this edge. This is one of the knives I've made, and well, boy, this has been through some hardship. It's dull and the edge has a few small nicks. We're gonna restore this to a razor sharp edge without removing too much material.
So we are starting with a 220 grit whetstone. This coarse grit is perfect for reshaping the edge and removing any damage. What is key when sharpening any edge is that you need to keep a constant angle. I've acquired a lot of skills in the workshop over the years, and trust me, consistently sharpening an angle perfectly by hand is something reserved for blade masters. I myself am far from mastering that skill. So make sure that you have a jig to keep that angle perfect and constant. Blades usually have different angles depending on the quality of steel and the blade's general purpose. The easiest way to figure out the current angle of the blade is to mark the bevel with a permanent marker and then use the whetstone to see how much is being removed. Once it fits the marker, you know you got the perfect angle for that particular blade. So let's repair the edge with the 220 stone. I'm going to start with marking it. Now that we got it entirely marked, we're going to check with the whetstone if the angle is correct. It is a bit off, so we are going to increase the angle. Now we got it perfect, so let's start grinding. Now notice that we can see the water running on the bevel, and as we see it run on the bevel, we know which parts are being sharpened. What you want is to always have as much water running on the bevel as possible, because then you know that as much as possible of the blade is in contact with the stone. The water is cooling the blade, so we do not have to be worried about overheating. First question you ask yourself is, when do you know that your side is done? Well, there's no set number of passes or set number of time. It all depends on how hard you push and the grinding stone's grit. But it's a very, very easy way to check when it's done. And it's quite simple. You just feel for burr on the opposite side. Now I have sharpened this side, which means that the burr is going to appear on this side. And as you run your finger very, very carefully, remember that, you can feel burr forming on this side of the bevel. If you have burr on the entire side, then that means you are done and you can repeat the same process on the other side. Usually go just as many passes on the other side that you have done on this side, and you should be fine. I have a few more passes since there is no real burr here yet. On this side, the middle portion, I'm going to go for a few more passes, and then we're going to switch the blade on the other side, and we're going to do the same thing with the 220. Now there's burr everywhere, and we are switching, and we are repeating the exact same process on the other side. The only thing we really can get wrong here and ruin the blade entirely is to be careful not to overheat the edge during the sharpening, as the heat ruins the blade hardness from the hardening and tempering process. When dry grinding, this goes extremely fast. Trust me, unfortunately, I'm speaking out of my own experience. I have ruined countless hours in blade making process when ruining the hardening process just by dry grinding and when setting up the bevel. So using a whetstone technically makes this impossible, since the water always runs over and cools the bevel and the blade. Let's get grinding. Now with the use of this stone, I have changed the grit on my whetstone to 1000. and we will do equally many passes now and get burrs on both sides, and then we're going over to the Japanese stone. So this is the edge after the 1000th stone. We're gonna go up to 4000 now. This is sharp, but it's nowhere near ninja sharp. Let's go. The final step is where the magic happens. 4000 gritstone polishes the bevel to mirror finish, reducing friction and making the knife glide effortlessly through whatever you're cutting. Now, if you don't have 4000 gritstone, then after the 1000 gritstone, you need to hone your blade on the leather wheel. The result is great just by doing this, but you do get it better on the Japanese stone, and you do get this lovely mirror finish, which you don't otherwise. One of the most confusing topics for me are angles, because people usually say it's an angle of 15, it's an angle of 20 or 30, but do they mean on each side or is it the total? So let's clear that out. Different knives have different angles depending on their purpose. For example, a typical fillet knife has an angle of 15 degrees per side, which totals 30 degrees. A normal kitchen knife, on the other hand, has 20 degrees per side, totaling 40-degree angle. Then you have the more aggressive knives, the Japanese knives. These knives have an angle of around 10 to 15 per side, which totals 30-degree angle for a kitchen knife. And that's very, very good. Now, why do the Japanese knives have a more aggressive angle? Well, it's simple. The steel is more high quality and much harder. So you can give the knife a more aggressive angle and it will still not become dull because of the higher quality. And that's the thing about it. So finally, let's remove the blade from the jig and just look at that bevel. Perfect mirror. And let's see how sharp the blade actually is. Looking good. And just like that, a dull knife is razor sharp again. This process isn't just about maintenance. It's about respect for the craft, for the tools, and for the work they do. If you take care of your blades, they'll take care of you for a lifetime. Now, if you found this video helpful, please hit the like button, please hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.